Have you ever caught something you weren't meant to see? Like the way someone's eyes linger on you, holding you in place for a heartbeat too long, or how their voice softens when they say your name, like they're handing you a secret wrapped in velvet. I was 19, sprawled across my best friend's kitchen table, my pencil scratching aimlessly at a sketchpad, when his mom, Clara, turned from the counter, her hands dusted with flour, and smiled at me. "You always notice the little things," she said, her voice warm, like a melody you didn't know you'd been humming your whole life. But there was something in her hazel eyes, a flicker, a shadow of something unspoken that made my stomach twist, like I'd stumbled onto a truth I wasn't ready to carry. It wasn't just a compliment. It felt like a confession, one I hadn't asked for but couldn't unhear. Have you ever felt a moment shift like that? Where the air thickens, the world tilts, and everything you thought you knew about someone, about yourself, starts to unravel like a thread pulled loose? That's where it began for me, in that quiet kitchen, with a woman who was supposed to be untouchable, a figure so woven into the fabric of my life that noticing her felt like betraying the very ground I stood on. And after that, I couldn't stop seeing her, couldn't stop feeling the weight of her gaze, like it was rewriting something inside me. My name's Jake, and this all went down the summer after my freshman year of college, when I came back to our small suburban town, the kind of place where secrets don't stay buried long, where every neighbor knows the sound of your car pulling into the driveway. My best friend, Ethan, and I had been inseparable since we were kids, building forts out of couch cushions in his backyard, sneaking extra cookies from his kitchen, staying up late under the glow of a flashlight, whispering about girls, dreams, and the kind of future that felt infinite when we were 13. His house was my sanctuary, a second home where the chaos of my own life couldn't reach me. That summer, my parents were tearing each other apart in a divorce that felt like a war, their voices sharp with resentment, their house a maze of slammed doors and broken promises. I couldn't stand being there, so I started spending nearly every day at Ethan's, crashing on his couch, losing myself in video games until the early hours, trying to drown out the noise in my head. Ethan's mom, Clara, was always there, a constant presence, part of the backdrop of my childhood. She was 42, with this quiet grace, like she carried the weight of the world but made it look like a choice. Dark hair, always tied back loosely, strands slipping free when she moved, framing her face in a way that felt almost accidental. Hazel eyes that seemed to see straight through you, not judging, but knowing, like she could read the thoughts you hadn't even formed yet. She was the mom who'd make us sandwiches, ask about our day, laugh at our dumb jokes with a warmth that felt like home. But that summer, something changed. Maybe it was the way I saw her. Maybe it was the way she saw me. Or maybe it was both, a collision of moments we didn't mean to create. I'd been at Ethan's almost every day, escaping the shouting matches at home, the way my parents' voices seemed to claw at the walls. Clara knew what was going on. She'd asked me how I was holding up, her voice soft, like she was reaching out without pushing. I'd shrug, mumble something about it being fine, but her concern lingered, warm and heavy, like a blanket you didn't know you needed. It was the little things she did that started to stick with me, the way she'd leave an extra plate of dinner on the counter for me, knowing I hadn't eaten, the way she'd ask about the sketches I was working on for my art class, not just politely, but like she genuinely wanted to know, the way she'd remember small details I'd mentioned in passing, like the name of a band I liked or a book I was reading. I started noticing her more, not just as Ethan's mom, but as Clara. Her movements through the house, graceful but tired, her laugh, softer when it was just us in a room, the way her fingers brushed the edge of a cup or smoothed a tablecloth, like she was always trying to keep things in order. It wasn't something I planned. I didn't wake up one morning deciding to pay attention to her. It just happened, slow and quiet, like noticing a song you've heard 100 times, but suddenly catching the lyrics, the ones that hit you in the chest. That day in the kitchen, Ethan was upstairs, probably lost in his phone or napping, leaving the house quiet except for the soft clatter of dishes. I was at the table, sketching some abstract mess, lines and shapes that didn't add up to anything yet, just a way to keep my hands busy while my mind wandered. Clara was cleaning up, humming a tune I didn't know, her movements unhurried, like she was in no rush to be anywhere else. The sunlight streamed through the window, hitting the edge of her coffee mug on the counter, turning the plain ceramic into something almost luminous, like it belonged in a painting. I don't know why I said it, maybe I just needed to fill the silence, but the words slipped out. "That mug looks like a painting in this light." She stopped mid-motion, her hand stilling on a dish towel, and turned to look at me. Her lips curved into that smile, soft and warm, but her eyes held mine for a moment too long, like she was seeing something new, something I hadn't meant to show. "You always notice the little things," she said, her tone light, almost teasing, but there was a weight to it, a quiet intensity that made my heart kick up, a sudden thud in my chest. I dropped my gaze to my sketchpad, pretending to focus on the lines, but my hands were unsteady, and I could still feel her eyes on me. That moment felt different, heavier, like we'd stepped into a space we hadn't meant to find, a space where the rules weren't clear. The weeks that followed were a haze of tension I couldn't shake, like a low hum in the back of my mind. Every time I went to Ethan's, I told myself to act normal, to focus on him, on our friendship, on the stupid stuff we always did, playing games, arguing over who'd win in a zombie apocalypse, laughing until our sides hurt. But Clara was always there, her presence like a shadow I couldn't step out of. Every interaction felt charged, like static electricity waiting to spark. She'd asked me to help with something small, carrying groceries from the car, reaching a high shelf in the pantry, and it was innocent enough, the kind of thing she'd asked me to do 100 times before. But now, her hand would brush mine as she handed me a bag, or she'd stand just a little too close, her shoulder grazing mine as we moved past each other. I'd catch myself watching her, noticing the smallest things, the way her fingers tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the way her voice softened when she spoke to me, like she was sharing something meant only for me. It felt like we were playing a game no one had acknowledged, a game with stakes I didn't understand but couldn't stop playing. I started questioning everything, my mind spinning in circles. Was I imagining it? Was she just being kind, maternal, and I was twisting it into something it wasn't because my head was a mess from my parents' divorce? I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, her smile, her glance, the way her voice lingered on my name. I'd tell myself I was being stupid, that I was reading too much into nothing, but then there'd be moments that made me doubt my doubt. One night, Ethan and I were watching a movie in their living room, some action flick we'd seen a dozen times, the kind where you don't have to think. Clara came in with a bowl of popcorn, her hair loose, wearing a soft cardigan that made her look less like a mom and more like someone I didn't know how to categorize. She sat on the couch with us, closer than she needed to be, and Ethan was half asleep, sprawled across one end, oblivious. She pulled a blanket over her legs, and her knee brushed mine under it, a small, accidental touch that sent my pulse racing. She didn't move it. Neither did I. My eyes stayed locked on the screen, but all I could think about was that tiny point of contact, the warmth of her knee against mine, like it was the only thing anchoring me to the room. When she got up to get water, she glanced back at me, and I swear there was something in her expression, something knowing, something that said she felt the shift too, and she wasn't pulling away. The guilt was like a stone in my chest, heavy and unrelenting, pressing down harder every day. Ethan was my brother in all but blood. We'd been through everything together. First crushes that crashed and burned, math tests we barely passed, the time we got caught sneaking out at 15 and grounded for a month. He trusted me, let me into his home, his life, and here I was, letting these thoughts creep in about his mom, of all people. I'd lie awake at night, my mind a tangle of shame and longing, trying to convince myself it was nothing, that I was just confused, caught up in the chaos of my parents' divorce, projecting my need for stability onto her. But the more I tried to push it away, the more it consumed me, like a fire I couldn't put out. I started finding excuses to be around her, offering to help with dishes when Ethan was distracted, staying later after he went to bed, lingering in the kitchen while she made coffee. And she never stopped me. She talked to me about her life, things she didn't seem to share with anyone else, her art history degree, gathering dust because she'd given up her dreams for her family, the gallery job she'd wanted in her 20s, before marriage and motherhood became her world, the way she sometimes felt invisible, like her life was a series of tasks for other people, her own desires buried under years of routine. It was like she was letting me in, showing me pieces of herself that were raw, unguarded, vulnerable. That's when the line between us started to blur, and I didn't know how to step back, didn't know if I wanted to. One evening, Ethan was out with his girlfriend, leaving the house quiet, and I was at their place, supposedly waiting for him to get back. Clara was in the backyard, tending to her garden, her hands buried in the soil as she pulled weeds, her movements deliberate, like she was pouring herself into the earth. I don't know what made me go out there, some pull I couldn't name, but I did, my sneakers sinking into the soft grass, the air heavy with the scent of dirt and flowers. She looked up, her face smudged with soil, a streak of it across her cheek, and gave me that same soft smile, the one that felt like it was just for me. "You're always around, Jake," she said, her tone teasing but warm, like she was glad I was there, like my presence was something she'd come to expect. I laughed, but my throat felt tight, like I was holding back something I didn't even understand. I crouched beside her, pretending to care about the plants, asking dumb questions about roses and soil pH, anything to keep the conversation going. Really, I just wanted to be near her, to feel the quiet ease of her presence. We talked for an hour, about nothing important, about everything that mattered. Her childhood in a small town not unlike ours, where she dreamed of being an artist. My sketches, how I used them to make sense of the world. The way the stars looked brighter out here, away from the city's glow. When she stood brushing dirt from her hands, she stumbled slightly, her balance thrown by the uneven ground. I caught her arm, instinctive, my fingers closing around her wrist, her skin warm under my touch. For a split second, either of us moved. Her eyes searched mine, and I felt like I was falling, like the ground wasn't solid anymore, like we were standing at the edge of something vast and dangerous. "Careful," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, but she didn't pull away, not right away. Her gaze held mine, and I swear I saw something there, something that mirrored the chaos in my chest, a longing she wasn't supposed to feel, a question neither of us could answer. That moment in the garden was like a line we'd crossed without saying it, a shift that changed everything. I couldn't pretend anymore, couldn't hide from the truth that was clawing its way to the surface. I was falling for her, and it was wrong on every level I could think of. Clara was Ethan's mom, married to his dad, a man who seemed to drift through their house like a ghost, their conversations clipped, functional, devoid of warmth. She was 23 years older than me, with a life I couldn't begin to understand, a history of choices and sacrifices that had shaped her into someone I both knew and didn't know at all. But none of that stopped the way my chest tightened when she looked at me, or how I started memorizing the smallest details of her, the way her voice lilted when she was tired, the way it softened when she said my name, like it was a word she held carefully. I noticed things I hadn't before, the faint lines around her eyes when she laughed, etched by years of joy and quiet sorrow, the way her hands moved when she talked about something she loved, like she was painting the air with her words, the way she'd pause sometimes, mid-sentence, like she was catching herself before she said too much. I tried to pull back, to put distance between us, to rebuild the walls that had crumbled without me noticing. I stopped going to Ethan's as often, made excuses about summer classes or helping my mom pack up the house as the divorce finalized. But Ethan noticed the change, his eyes narrowing when I dodged his questions. "Dude, what's up with you?" he asked one day, tossing a controller at me during a half-hearted gaming session, his tone light but his gaze sharp, like he could sense something was off. I shrugged, mumbled something about family stress, but I could barely meet his eyes, the guilt twisting in my gut like a knife. It wasn't just the feelings for Clara. It was the secrecy, the way I was hiding this from him, letting it grow in the space between us. I started wondering if Clara felt it too, or if I was just a kid with a stupid crush, projecting my loneliness onto her kindness, building something out of nothing. But then she'd text me, small, innocent things, like asking if I'd seen a movie we talked about, or sending a photo of a painting she'd found online, saying it reminded her of my sketches. The messages were safe, the kind of thing anyone could read without raising an eyebrow, but they kept me tethered to her, a thread I couldn't bring myself to cut. One night, I couldn't sleep, my mind tangled in thoughts of her, her smile, her voice, the way her eyes seemed to see me in a way no one else did. I went for a walk, no destination, just needing to move, to outrun the chaos in my head. Somehow, I ended up near Ethan's house, the streets quiet under the hum of streetlights, the air cool and heavy with the promise of rain. It was past midnight, and I saw a light on in their kitchen. Clara was there, alone, sitting at the table with a book, her hair loose, falling over one shoulder, catching the soft glow of the lamp. I don't know what possessed me, but I pulled out my phone and texted her. "Can't sleep. You up?" Her reply came almost instantly, a single line that made my heart pound. "Come to the back door." I slipped into the backyard, the grass damp under my sneakers, my breath shallow as I approached the door. She opened it, her face soft in the dim light, wearing a sweater that made her look younger, more vulnerable, like she was someone I could reach out and touch. "You okay?" she asked, her voice low, like she didn't want to wake the house, didn't want to break the fragile quiet between us. I nodded, but I wasn't okay, not even close. We sat at the kitchen table, the silence heavy but not uncomfortable, like we were sharing something that didn't need words. Her hand rested on the table, inches from mine, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her skin without touching it. I wanted to say something, to bridge the gap between us, to name the thing we were both circling but never touching. But the weight of everything, Ethan, her husband, the age gap, the sheer impossibility of it, kept me silent. We just sat there, existing in that stolen moment, and it felt like enough and not enough all at once, like we were holding on to something that could slip away any second. The tension kept building, every interaction a tightrope walk between what was safe and what wasn't. At a barbecue Ethan's family hosted, I caught her watching me from across the yard, her eyes lingering as I laughed with Ethan and his cousins, tossing a football back and forth. When I offered to help carry plates inside, our hands brushed as she handed me a stack, and this time, she didn't look away, her fingers lingering for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. "You're different, Jake," she said, her voice low, like she was piecing something together, like she was seeing me for the first time. I wanted to ask what she meant, to push past the vagueness, to know if she felt the same pull I did, but Ethan walked in, complaining about the heat, his voice shattering the moment like glass. I started noticing her husband more, how he barely looked at her, how their conversations were all logistics, schedules, and obligations, no trace of the warmth I'd seen in her when she talked to me. It made me angry, a sharp, irrational anger that confused me even more. Why did I care so much? Why did it feel like she was trapped in a life that didn't see her, didn't value her, and I was the only one who noticed? I'd catch myself imagining things I had no right to, her leaving, starting over, the two of us somewhere else, where the rules didn't apply, where the world wouldn't judge us. But then I'd snap back to reality, to the fact that she was Ethan's mom, that she had a life, a family, a history I had no place in. The weeks dragged on, each day a battle between wanting to see her and knowing I shouldn't. I started noticing the way she carried herself, the small signs of strain in her smile when her husband was around, the way she'd light up when we talked about art or music, things that seemed to remind her of who she used to be. One afternoon, I was at their house, helping Ethan fix his bike in the garage. Clara came out with glasses of iced tea, her hair pulled back, a few strands sticking to her neck in the summer heat. She handed me a glass, her fingers brushing mine, and for a moment, we just stood there, the air thick with something unspoken. Ethan was focused on the bike, oblivious, but I could feel her presence like a pulse, steady and inescapable. "Thanks," I said, my voice rough, and she nodded, her eyes holding mine before she turned back to the house. I watched her go, my chest tight, knowing I was slipping further into something I couldn't control. Another time, I stayed late after a movie night, Ethan already asleep upstairs, his snores echoing faintly through the house. Clara was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters, and I offered to help, grabbing a sponge like it was the most natural thing in the world. We worked in silence for a while, the only sound the soft scrub of the sponge and the hum of the refrigerator. Then she started talking, her voice low, about a trip she'd taken in her 20s to an art gallery in Chicago, how she'd stood in front of a painting for an hour, feeling like it was speaking to her. I listened, hanging on every word, imagining her younger, free, unburdened by the life she had now. "You'd love it there," she said, glancing at me, her eyes soft but searching. "You see things the way I used to." The words hit me like a punch, and I wanted to tell her I saw her, too, that I saw the woman she was beneath the routine, the responsibilities. But I didn't. I just nodded, my throat tight, and kept scrubbing the counter, the space between us heavy with things we couldn't say. The breaking point came during a rainstorm, the kind that turns the world gray and blurry, the kind that makes you feel like you're the only two people left. Ethan was at his girlfriend's, and his dad was working late, as usual, leaving the house quiet except for the drum of rain on the roof. I'd stopped by to grab a book I'd lent Ethan, a flimsy excuse I barely believed myself. Clara was alone, soaked from trying to fix a leak in the garage, her hair plastered to her face, her clothes clinging to her in a way that made my breath catch. I helped her, both of us laughing at the absurdity of it, water dripping everywhere, the garage floor slick under our feet. We were a mess, but the air was thick with something heavier than the rain, something that had been building for weeks. When we finished, we stood in the doorway to the house, catching our breath, the storm still raging outside. She handed me a towel, her fingers lingering on mine as she passed it over, her touch warm against my cold skin. "You don't have to keep coming back, Jake," she said, her voice unsteady, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. I stepped closer, my heart hammering so loud I thought she'd hear it, thought it might drown out the rain. "What if I want to?" I said, the words barely a whisper, raw and reckless, spilling out before I could stop them. Her breath caught, her eyes wide, searching mine, like she was looking for an answer to a question neither of us had asked. For a moment, I thought she might close the distance, that we'd crossed the line we'd been dancing around for weeks, that the world would fall away and leave just us. But she stepped back, her hands trembling slightly, her expression a mix of fear and something else, something that looked like longing, like regret. "Jake," she said, her voice breaking, "you should go." And I did, stepping out into the rain, the cold water sharp against my skin, my chest tight with everything I couldn't say, everything we'd left hanging in the air. After that night, everything changed, like a door had slammed shut between us. Clara pulled back, her warmth replaced by a polite distance, her smiles careful, her words measured. No more late-night texts, no more lingering glances, no more moments that felt like they belonged only to us. It was like she'd built a wall, and I couldn't blame her, not after I'd crossed a line, even if it was just words, just a moment that felt too real. I stopped going to Ethan's altogether, told him I needed space to deal with family stuff, the divorce, anything to explain why I was pulling away. He didn't push, but I could tell he was hurt, his texts shorter, his invitations less frequent, his laughter less easy when we did hang out. The guilt was unbearable, not just for betraying him, for letting this thing grow in the shadows of our friendship, but for wanting something that could have shattered his world, his family, everything he knew. I kept replaying that night in the garage, her trembling voice, the way she looked at me like she wanted to say something but couldn't, like she was as torn as I was. I wondered if she felt it too, if those moments meant as much to her as they did to me, or if I'd built it all in my head, a fantasy born out of loneliness, out of needing someone to see me when my own life felt like it was falling apart. I tried to move on, to focus on college, on friends, on anything but her. But she was there, in the back of my mind, in the way I'd catch myself sketching her hands, her eyes, without realizing it. I'd see something, a painting, a song, a sunset, and think of her, of the way she'd talk about art like it was a language she still spoke, of the way she'd made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. I started avoiding places I knew she might be, the grocery store near their house, the park where she walked sometimes. But the town was small, and I couldn't escape the pull of her, the memory of those moments that had felt like they belonged to us alone. I wondered what she was thinking, if she ever thought of me, if she regretted pulling back, or if she was relieved, free of the weight of whatever we'd been circling. I wanted to ask her, to know if I'd been alone in this, but I couldn't bring myself to reach out, couldn't risk opening that door again. Months later, I saw her at a coffee shop in town, the kind of place where students studied and old friends lingered over lattes. She was alone, sitting by the window, reading, her glasses slipping down her nose, a cup of tea cooling beside her. For a second, it felt like no time had passed, like I could walk over and pick up where we left off, like the world hadn't changed since that night in the rain. But I didn't move. I just stood there, watching her turn a page, her face calm but tired, like she was carrying something heavy she didn't show the world. She looked up, and our eyes met across the room, a fleeting moment that felt like it held everything we'd never said. She smiled, that same soft smile, but it was different now, sad, maybe resigned, like she was saying goodbye to something we'd never named, something we both felt but couldn't touch. I nodded, a small acknowledgement, and walked away, my chest tight with the weight of it all, with the questions I'd never ask, the answers I'd never get. I still don't know if she felt what I felt, if those moments in the kitchen, the garden, the garage, meant as much to her as they did to me, if they kept her up at night the way they did me. But that summer, those fleeting, forbidden glances, they changed me. They showed me how thin the line is between what's right and what you can't help feeling, how a single look, a single word, can unravel everything you thought you were, everything you thought you knew. Have you ever had a moment you couldn't explain, a feeling you knew was wrong but couldn't shake, like it was written into your bones? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know your story. If this hit you where it hurts, smash that like button and subscribe for more. You never know when a glance, a word, a moment, can change everything. 10.